Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Dukeman, and this week I have with me Kyla Courte. How are you doing, Kyla?
I'm doing great, Daniel. Thank you.
Kyla and I connected about 2 weeks ago. She had a story that she wanted to share, and we always try to get different perspectives of how people deal with mental health, and and it's all unique to us. It's all our own story, and um, sometimes the way that what affects us is much different than it affects other people. And I felt like Kyla had a really interesting story and kind of an interesting background with her mental health and how she's overcome it. So Kyla, let's roll into it. Tell us about yourself and who you are, what you do, all that.
Okay. Hi, so I'm Kyla. I'm from Alberta, Canada. Pretty simple, normal life. I was born to a mom and dad, and I have a little sister. Um, I currently work in finance, and that's been my path for the last 9 years here. But I would say my journey with mental health, or at least the ignoring of my mental health, really started when I was a teenager. And we're a smaller town here, so I don't know what it might have been like for a lot of other people, but alcohol became something we regularly uh, used for fun, and um, that's what we would do, and uh, probably in a lot larger amounts than what actually is normal, but it just felt normal because
Mm,
everybody was doing it. So um, yeah, I was an early early neglector of that, and I think that sort of um, became my coping mechanism, and it became my shield, my distraction, the way that I could sort of outsource my confidence and not really build those two tools authentically within myself. So
mm,
I like to say that I was my own worst enemy. um, I believed a lot of stories that life had to be hard, and in order to be deserving and worthy, you had to have some struggle and overcome some things, and it shouldn't be easy. And I think my first taste of guilt kind of settled in because a lot of things did come relatively easy to me. I didn't struggle in school, that seemed to take care of itself. And when it came to sports, I don't feel like I ever really put in 100% effort, but was still good enough. And um, I just put a lot of pressure on myself, and I think created some expectations that maybe my family did or didn't have, and just really let my mind run wild with all of those things over the years. So
yeah.
yeah.
So you did mention something that I've heard many times about alcohol, and essentially it's like it's the liquid courage, right? It's our source of confidence because we think we don't have any, so we're just like, oh, like if I want to be not socially awkward, I can have a few drinks
Yeah,
and then I fit in, or at least I feel like I do. I can be the life of the party, whatever that is. uh because we haven't figured out how to actually develop our own confidence in a way that is productive for us.
exactly. It was, and I think for me too, it was that um, well, if I do something when I'm drunk, it wasn't really me, and I was just drunk. So drunk
Mm,
Kyla can be a fool and make some stupid choices, or um, hook up with people and not be, it was just drunk. It wasn't really
mm,
my real self, right?
mm,
So it was sort of a way to slip accountability in a sense for
mm.
making some pretty loose choices for myself as it went. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And I
and
and I think as teenagers we all fall into that. A lot of us do, at least those who drink as teenagers, and it sometimes becomes a hard thing to let go of as we get older.
it does. And I think that as I watched my friends um, transition into adulthood and marriage and motherhood, I just sort of kept the drinking wagon going. That was kind of, you know, I never, I didn't, I didn't put the brakes on for myself, and it sort of became a tool that I defaulted to as life's problems started getting a little bit more real. And um, when I sort of chose to completely abandon myself because it felt like, just getting along with my parents and going to school and doing the normal thing, I felt like I was sort of turning my back on what my spirit came here to do. And drinking just became a way to escape from knowing that what I was doing wasn't what I was meant to do. So as I went through uh, college, and university, I just kept drinking. I had some relationships where, well, most of my relationships probably in my younger days were really founded on alcohol. We would meet when I was out and drinking in this like life of a party, and I sort of just had to keep up this character and this one part of me that was really taking over.
Mm.
So
Yeah, it becomes it's the double life. It's an interesting thing. I've certainly experienced that myself, and I've had others on here who have experienced it too. That it was such a part of them for so long
yeah,
that um, we sometimes hold on to those things because it is a comfortable spot, because it's given us the ability to find confidence to be that person that we think that we want to be, or maybe that we do want to be, but it's the only way that we know how to be that person.
yeah, it is. And with me, the drinking, it was all the fun in the night, and then it was that wake up and immediately that bomb of guilt and shame, and what did I do? Who did I trot on? Who have I hurt? Who do I have to apologize to? It was just like those feelings of guilt and shame that sort of became my fishbowl of existence, were magnified every time I would wake up hungover, or after a big night out of drinking. And I think that there's even a thread of addiction with feelings like that too, where we sort of just get addicted to those hits and those waves of feeling bad, which
Mhm.
seems bizarre on this side of things, but
And it is. I mean, we just like we're addicted to the hit of dopamine from drugs and alcohol. Sometimes we are addicted to the misery too.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
uh, and I don't know why that is. Humans are fascinating creatures.
we are. It's like we all talk about, peace and quiet, but we just love the little dramatics of those feelings, whether it's the high or the low. And it's
Mhm.
been an interesting part of my journey. When I can feel that some stories and threads of those feelings are pulling back in, it's always my little warning to get back to myself and my practices that have kept me on this side of things. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So um, yeah, I always feel a little bit weird reflecting on my story because it's not one of um, real trauma or outside, influence. I was just a victim of my own self, and I traumatized myself, and I outsourced a lot of my opinions and my ways of thinking. I sort of um, believed some identities that I built with myself, and those led me to making some pretty big choices for myself that it wasn't even a choice. It was just that automatic programming, and then you find yourself on the other side of those choices and just unable to even look at them really. It's
Mhm.
sticking them into that dark little box in your soul.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So when you say that you outsourced those beliefs, was it a like a peer influenced type belief, or that you picked up, or I guess I was just maybe looking for a little more detail on what you meant by that.
I think that it was, yeah, somewhat of peer influence, but also I really, um, I really looked up to my dad, and I really looked up to his hard work attitude. And I thought that that was more valuable than maybe some of the um, more natural things that come with being a woman. Like, I didn't really value the nurturing or the care that maybe my mom provided, and I looked at my dad as that, hard worker and provider and income earner as, what I needed to be. And
Mm,
I didn't really understand kind of how I was becoming a little bit misogynistic in my what is labeled today sort of as like feminism or
mm,
female empowerment, right? Where
mm,
um, there is, at least for the time that I grew up, there was a loud emphasis on women going to work and um, running with men as income earners and getting a job and career. And I was always so smart that I just wanted to be able to focus on that and get a good job and work really hard. And I didn't
mm,
really stop to slow down to even think about how that felt within me. So
mm,
um, my snowball really got um, rolling after I did make the choice to like terminate a pregnancy. And I
mm,
didn't even really think about that on a spiritual or an emotional level. It looked like an easy way out of a situation I wasn't ready for. And
mm,
I, um, at the same time, was really ashamed of that choice, even though I'd had loud conversations with plenty of people about how pro-choice we were.
mm.
Um, but yeah, it just, um, yeah, it was a choice that I thought people made lightly and then got to feel the consequences of not um, really running through what that meant in the long run.
Mm.
Yeah, so
And so when dealing with something like that, that in itself often doesn't really, I mean, it's like the consequences and those emotions that certainly wasn't going to be something that it didn't build you up at all in the
no,
long run, even though it did seem like, hey, this is a way out of a situation that's a potentially life-changing big situation, right?
yeah,
Um, and it's a difficult thing and it's an unfortunate thing, because we do often make choices that we regret, and then we have to find a way to become at peace with those choices.
yeah, exactly. And I spent probably 10 years just in pure denial that I'd even made that choice. And
Mm,
um, it was a bit of an undertone in my life. And I don't think, like a lot of the people who loved me or interacted with me on a day to day, really understood, obviously, because I hadn't shared that with anybody. But
mm,
it it was always kind of bubbling under the surface. I remember having fights with my dad and him being like, why are you so irritable? Or, where is this coming from? But it was just that always lurking under the surface because I hadn't accepted, integrated, and loved that part of myself,
mm,
back into um back into wholeness. So
mm,
alcohol became a really good friend, trying to smooth that over. And I also found myself focusing on the problems of the world and the problems of everybody else that was loved and around me in this wild savior martyr mode, because I just wanted to focus on anything except what actually I could control and I could fix. So uh, I jumped right into vegetarianism and trying to prove to myself that I was this good person because I didn't do XYZ, and um, just focusing on like the pain and suffering of even all these animals. And then as I transitioned into veganism, that even got deeper, and it just was somebody who was being very irresponsible with their pain, kind of you know reacting to everything that was around. And um, it just all sort of came to a head the winter of 2021 for me when um, I had falling out with my dad, who I'm super close to, and we weren't talking. And this was the longest time we'd ever not talked, which wasn't really that long, but he's had massive health challenges where we didn't expect that he would make it much further. So we sort of went into this grief spiral where you're waking up every day with your breath held, just wondering if today was going to be the day that he wasn't here anymore. And
Mm.
by some miracle, he's still here with us. So luckily, we were able to kind of come out of that cloud a few years ago as a family. But I'd had that going on, and then I had a partner at the time who'd injured himself really bad, and we were in the middle of pandemic stuff where businesses couldn't be open, so there was financial stress, and I was just trying to control every element of my life and holding it so tightly, and all my marbles just fell apart a little bit, and I finally had to take a little bit of a step back from work. And I was really mad at myself because I was taking time off and felt like I was letting down the team. And I just in that moment was like, you need to get really honest with yourself here and make some changes. So yeah.
So when you step back, I mean, that's everybody has that rock bottom point where it's enough is enough, right? And that's where change happens because you can't, like, there's the old proverb or saying of like you can't build a foundation on sand, right? So you kind of have to hit that rock bottom. What was that like for you when you finally had that breakthrough? I mean, you said you started taking time for yourself and you said, I have to change this.
Yeah.
Digging out of that, what was that like?
It was really quite beautiful. It was slowness. It was just a complete surrender for what was probably the first time in my life. We get on such an autopilot with working and having to pay bills and getting caught up in the dramatics of relationships that aren't healthy and
Mm.
are confused and are two kind of broken people trying to keep each other together. And it was sort of the first time in all those years that I just had enough space to slow everything down and drop back into my body. I started so simple. I would lay on the ground outside my house in the sun and just sit quietly and listen to the birds. And it was just that simple, at the beginning. And after that, I have always been a little bit non-traditional in my healing or viewpoints. So I connected with a Reiki master who then I ended up going through some training with and just learning how to put my hands on myself and sort of flow with the energy that's inside. And so I was just touching my body and just feeling my breath and quieting my mind. And it was like systems that had been dormant for ages kind of came back online, and I was like alive again, right? Yeah. So that was really powerful. I started taking hot baths before bed and just again sitting in the quiet. And I worked with a counselor who, it took me a while. It was always really fun for me to start a relationship with like a counselor or a therapist and just talk about all of these problems with my dad and this situation and that situation. But this was kind of the first time where I'm like, no, you need to be honest. You need to get to the bottom of everything here, and you need to talk about yourself and just take that responsibility for where life had ended up, and start telling some better stories to myself. So through Reiki, I would write poetry. One thing that really landed for me during that time was just how I'd heard that I'd heard alcohol referred to as a spirit, like that's why that we call it spirits. How if we aren't in our bodies and we are away from home, it leaves room for that spirit of alcohol to kind of come in and settle. And
Mm.
I wrote this poem to my drunk, thanking her for um, driving the car while we weren't here, kind of running the show. Things could have been done better, but at least part of us had stepped up to the plate and was getting us through. So instead of that hatred and shame and guilt, I just was able to shift into a mindset of love and loving all of these parts of me, and really recognizing that this version of me would have made different choices, but the version of me that made those choices was doing the best that she could. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, just uh, uh, it's I call it my great remembering, because it was like things you already innately just know as a human being, but you kind of have to let them flood back in and land.
Mm. It is remarkable. I mean, so it sounds like you really through that became at peace with your alter ego almost, right? With the self that you didn't like. But the what you said about the great remembrance and that you the things that you innately know, it's it's amazing what we know instinctually, but we can convince ourselves that it's not true and that it's not the case or that it's not real and we can push it aside. But I think it's so beautiful when you talk about these transitions that you made and you started to embrace that innate truth that you knew and that you knew all along from what it sounds like, but had just pushed it away that no, this isn't real. And I think that's huge because that is such a big part of us overcoming is to surrender and
Mhm.
to acknowledge what we already know instead of trying to resist it.
100%. And I, yeah, I say I've become a student of surrender, because to me, that's the number one thing. It was like just letting go and letting it all wash over and over and over as many times as it needed to, and getting comfortable in the discomfort of the humanity that we are all, doing our best with. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, it was quite the adventure. And I never told myself I was going to quit drinking. I'm an excellent negotiator, especially with myself. And I thought I could have this deepened spiritual side, and my mental was getting cleaned up. And then I was writing a big exam for the designation I was working on. And I decided to procrastinate studying for this exam by doing a deep, like 7-day meditation course. And um, I didn't have any expectations for this course, but by the end of those 7 days, it was like that spirit of alcohol, it just left. It
Mhm.
just left me. It was like, you've got this, you're good. And that feeling, it's like you just need to get bumped out of orbit for enough time to really just give yourself a chance to try something different. And
Mhm.
it's amazing how fast everything can respond once you set that intention.
Yeah, absolutely. And that intention is key
Mhm.
because if we just go through the motions, nothing changes without
No.
intention. And I certainly recognize that in my development, there was a lot of time that I was just going through the motion and just really had convinced myself that I wasn't though. And it wasn't until I truly surrendered to it and was just like, I can't do this anymore. I can't live this way. That we make that initial breakthrough. And then from there, you're off and running and it's you can get as much accomplished in the healing process as quickly as you desire. It seems like anyways, where all of a sudden it's just accelerated because the faster you surrender to it It's just you're shedding that stuff as quick as you can pull it off.
Yeah, 100%. And it is, it's that I like remember the moment where it was like that was like dipping my toe into surrender. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready. And yeah, within the year from that landing and me taking it in and moving it from a thought to like my body in action, it was like I started eating meat again. I quit my job and shifted into a different role. I had a 7-year relationship come to an end. I quit smoking, quit drinking, quit gambling, and just really, yeah. I'm certain there was like 4 or 5 other things that just fell off, but all of those big ones just, it was like water being thrown and those identities being washed away. Oh, I I shifted from being quite a liberal or left-leaning individual to a little more common sense approach to my worldview. So that
Mm.
was another big one that I was just like all of a sudden words that people were saying that were it was I think that was part of my journey with triggers, and then shifting into taking triggers as something that you just react like a baby to and turning them into really valuable information about what part of you is being activated by somebody else. So
Mm.
it was turning those from um, something bad that you want to get weird about into just the greatest gift of awareness that you could see in yourself. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
that was
great.
a yeah.
So what was the most unsuspecting shift that you had?
I think that it was probably either that or my journey back to eating animal products and kind of I was someone who loved I've always loved cooking, and when I was younger my sister and I would talk about having like a barbecue restaurant. Like we are in Alberta, we've got uh excellent beef, and I always really enjoyed that. And then it was sort of like my self punishment, turning my back on that, and then coming back into it with a bit of a vengeance after sort of unprogramming and having my relationship with death even shift in a way where it was just more like grounded and honoring nature and the natural cycles that
Mm.
exist. So that one I I loved my identity as a vegan. I held on to that pretty tight. I'd formed a bit of community, which um, I hadn't had. And yeah, that was an interesting one to fall out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that change, did that community leave you? Like was there a separation there, or what were
Um,
those people accepting of your change?
there have been a few that I still am connected with. I feel like there was a natural shift happening before I even um, really finally like shifted that. So
Mm.
I haven't had any like major confrontation. I've just kind of uh, stepped away, and it's been fairly peaceful. I sort of said, this is what resonates with me now. If I no longer resonate with you, then thank you for the time we shared, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
which is a great way to do it because we are in a constant state of flux like that with
Yeah.
growth and change, and some people will be in it with you for the long haul, and other people are just there because right now the timing's right, and eventually they outgrow you, you outgrow them, you both
Yeah.
outgrow each other. And if you can do that in a peaceful transition, that's always the best way to do it. Because to me, you're honoring that time with them that you
Yeah.
had, that time that you did connect. And, one of you or both of you just took a little 1 degree shift. And
Yeah.
over time, that covered, miles and hundreds of miles. And eventually it's just the connection's gone. And that's
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah. And it has been, I've always had peaceful leavings, even ex-partners who've come in and out of my life. Like, uh, just that gratitude for the time and connection that you have with someone. And
Mm.
it's just a season, right? And we aren't meant to weather every season with every individual who comes into our life.
Mm.
So yeah, that was it was nice. It was just peaceful, and maybe others would be not so, but that's how it was from my perspective.
Well, that's great. That's it's always the best way to go. So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
What uh what are you working on now?
Oh, so I sort of said 2021 was my mind back online. 2022 was heavy focus back on my spirit. And 2023 is really just giving power back to my physical, my body, getting into the gym, which was something I never thought I would enjoy, but enjoying it, enjoying feeling strong and pushing myself in that way. Um, Continuing to add really good foods back into my diet, trying to shop as local as I can and make connections with people in my area who are doing the good work of raising food for us all. So that's my big one. Um, I also sort of had stepped back into a career that I'd left. Um, I'd left and then shifted out of because I was drowning and struggling and of course making everything 15 times harder. So I'm back in that same career and it's been really nice just with this new version of myself to understand that I wasn't terrible. I can do this. It's,
Mm.
it was just I was handicapping myself in all of the worst ways possible. So
Yeah.
um I'm an aunt to two little guys, and I feel like they kind of helped giving my life back too, because I got to choose, what kind of aunt do they deserve, the aunt that's sitting in the garage smoking and drinking while they're wanting to play, or the one who can get down and bike ride with them. My nephew's just turned 4, and he and I went for a bike ride the other day, and I'm on his dad's big mountain bike and he's on his little bike, and he looked at me for a race and I was like, okay, let's go. And I was going as hard as I could and could not pull even an inch in front of him. So I need to definitely step it up and be able to keep up with him because he's quite amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a great thing too, because kids do change us, even if they're not our own, but the influence, because they're just so, and I don't know, they haven't been tainted by the world yet, I guess would be
Mhm.
the best way to describe it. They just see things through their lens, and it's very much it's a lens of simplicity and bliss, and everything's okay, and and exploration. I mean, they want an answer to everything, but they aren't afraid of anything for that window. And I think when we're in that dark place, we become afraid of everything, or we don't care to explore the world around us because we've allowed it. We've consumed the bad things and not realized that there's all these good things out there. And
Cool.
I think kids really can bring that light back into you, that there is all this wonder and creation and great stuff out there. We just have to look for it. We have to want to find it.
100%. Yeah. Just like turning back on that curiosity. And
Hmm.
I know the one thing my nephews taught me is like delight, what that pure, unadulterated feeling of delight is for no reason other than loving the essence of somebody with your whole heart. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they're such a gift. And it's been healing. Even just being an aunt, you get a little bit of that nurturing that
Hmm.
I had chose not to have before.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's been beautiful.
Yeah, that's great. And it's great that you're embracing that ability to nurture. And it's important because like you had talked about kind of like the feminist movement earlier, and like not really heavy on that, but kind of in that role of like nurture or masculine, the feminine masculine. And it's important that we have both,
Mhm.
because it's important that I can nurture as a man, but
Yeah.
it's also important that as a woman that you can have that masculine quality to defend or to be strong and to
Yeah.
to provide. We have to have both, but I really feel, and like a lot of people look at it in a weird way, which is unfortunate, but like that's your natural role. Being a female is being in that feminine role, and that which is a nurturer, and and women are phenomenal nurturers. I mean, that's why they're often become moms, because they can just kick ass at that. And men have to really, we really have to push ourselves, some more than others, to be a nurturer and to really put that effort in, because we're not it's not our primary dominant role. And so to be able to see that you're going into that role with your nephews and embracing that, I think is very powerful in itself.
It has. And even just learning to nurture myself, right? Like
Mm,
just get that balance back where I can use that masculine side of me to execute tasks, but just to enjoy like that slow moving feminine that has to be the guiding force behind it all, right?
mm.
It kind of has to lead and soften and just open up that heart and get that all back into balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. And being willing to do that, because I think society really very much doesn't want us to, but there's so much power and peace in it. It's
There
great.
really, yeah, there really is. And I know it feels a little bit by design that
Mm,
society keeps us uh, villainizing, those roles. But just, yeah, the power of embracing it is astronomical.
mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think too, with like the more that you embrace that, the more fulfillment you'll have, because like you talked about, like the nurturing of yourself, and that's loving yourself, which you didn't love yourself before. I know you didn't say that, but I can tell by the past that you had in your story that you used to not love yourself. And and I know for me there was a time when I didn't love myself. And even in the transition, there was a period that I started to tell myself that I love myself, but I didn't really believe it. But when that transition actually occurs and you recognize that, no, I really do love me, it's such a cool thing, because you can look in the mirror and just smile ear to ear, because you see it, you say it, and you're like, hell yeah, I love me.
Yeah.
Like, look at me, I'm awesome. And
Yeah.
it's always funny because I've told some people that, and they just look at me and they're like, are you high? And you're like, no, I'm not. But it's just they just don't understand it. And I
Yeah.
think I didn't understand it until I did.
Yeah.
And then once it
Exactly.
clicked, and I talk a lot about self-care, and I read something the other day that kind of made me want to rephrase it, because I think they said that it's not really self-care, it's self-investment, because you're investing all that time and effort into yourself. You're not caring for yourself. You're not just staying in one spot, just curled up, like, no, I'm good, I love me. You're actually pouring into yourself. You're investing into yourself heavily, which allows you to truly grow and embrace those changes and to love yourself. And and it's such a powerful thing, because I think a lot of people don't truly ever love themselves. Or if they do, it's just on such a small scale that if they really embraced it, the power that could come from that is just, I think it's immeasurable.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Just all those hearts turned on with that genuine, unconditional throbbing of love that you
Yeah.
get when you start believing it. And you do, you feel a little bit insane. I remember when it first was happening as well, like I would catch my eye in the mirror and something beautiful would come into my mind, and I was like, damn, like who's this voice? Like who's this part of me? Because you can stick around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's such a neat thing. And I always love hearing it from other people, because it's virtually the same. It's just somebody else's words. But um, I mean, I've even heard it from people who talked about that they like had a very poor body image of themselves, even though they were very physically active and worked out, but they just had this poor image. And so they started standing in front of the mirror naked for a couple of minutes a day. And they said that at first they would just like pick out everything they didn't like man, my thighs are awful, this and that. This was a female who I'd heard this story from, and I can't remember the name, but it eventually one day they were like, dang, that's like a nice booty right there, and like so something caught them, and then it just the shift. And that's
Yeah.
kind of an extreme in a way, but we start to recognize those things, and
Yeah.
because we're investing in ourselves.
Yeah.
And I love seeing it from other people, and I love uh, like I can tell that you found it because I can tell how you smile and how you react when you talk about it. And it's just such an awesome thing to see it. I'm very happy for you that you found it because I always want to see more people find it because the joy that comes from that little bit of self-recognition that like, no, I love myself. I'm awesome.
Yeah.
Once you believe it, so it's so cool. It's just
Yeah.
unexplainable.
It is. It really is. And it's just like a new adventure every day with it, right? Like you find a little deeper pocket where you're like, oh my God, I just do love you. I had an interesting experience on a date the other day where I thought it went really decent. I was walls all the way down and just my natural weirdness, and which obviously wasn't for everyone because after he was like, no, I'm good. I'm like, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I like wanted to be sad or hurt a little for a split second. And then I was just like, I get to go home and hang out with myself and I get to, like it was completely okay. I was like, I'm fine with not being for everyone because I'm so for myself now,
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the good kind of selfish,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that you can pour into yourself and be just okay with it. That like, oh, you don't like me? That's cool. Like,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I'd been terrified of rejection. I my my dad was a dad who anything I asked him, it was no. And then I had to like justify and fight and
Mm.
provide all of the reasons why what I was asking was pretty reasonable. So I got this like huge fear of no, and to the point where I just wouldn't even ask, or I didn't need things, or and now like yeah, I'm just like no is not this big scary thing. It's just a beautiful word that I think we could all use saying a little bit more often. And yeah,
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 yeah, yeah.
really
And there's
enjoy.
definitely the times where it's appropriate, and it because we can't drain ourselves. And I think that's so much like you had talked about, like you had poured so much of yourself into all this activism and helping to try to solve everybody else's problems, but you weren't taking any time to take care of yourself. You weren't taking any time to pour into yourself, which further depleted you, which made your situation worse. And that's where that little bit of selfishness comes in, and why it's important to be selfish sometimes. And people, I should probably find another way to say it because people get upset when I say that I'm selfish and like, well, what do you mean? Like, well, I am. Like I know that I have to put myself first for so much, or I'll never be able to help anybody else.
Yeah.
And that is that like ultimate form of self-love and an investment in yourself is to love yourself so much that you put yourself before others. And but still knowing that at some point you're going to help others. Like I love help, but
Yeah.
I learned that I about killed myself because I was always helping other people. And then when I got done, I was like, well, there's no time for me.
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm too busy helping other people. So it was almost like I was just martyring, right? And you talked
100%.
about that too. And it's a real thing, and a lot of people don't see it, but it really is okay to just pour into yourself and just not worry about anybody else until you have filled your cup. And then while your cup's overflowing, let that overflow pour into other people.
Yeah. Exactly, because then you're helping from a place of genuine desire to serve
Mm,
other people and not from like that little hit of good person that comes from, that martyr theme. It
yeah.
was amazing when I felt the difference and I was immediately like, oh my God, in my like journey to be a nice person and a good person, I've become like a monster. Like I'm just
Mhm.
feeding myself all of this like junk emotion, and it wasn't for them. And I even to say that out loud, it is what it is. But yeah, it was almost more selfish in the way where it has that more negative connotation than it is has been to be like taking actual genuine care of myself and then helping from that place of nourished and fulfilled and a true yes, because you actually have the capacity to show up for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it should be. I think it's more fulfilling for us. It feels more genuine and fulfilling for others. And and we feel better about it because it's more fulfilling because we've already filled ourselves.
Yeah.
It's a great thing. And yeah, I don't think I could word it any other way than you did, really. It's exactly how it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And it's beautiful. And some days you still wake up and think like, has the magic moved on and am I back down to reality? And there's just an ebb and a flow that
Mhm.
you know you ride. And um it's like having the tools to just keep your train on the tracks, even if those tracks get bumpy, right?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. And
It's
whatever those tools are, I always tell people there's no one tool fits all to
no,
solve a problem. A hammer's not going to change a car tire,
no,
but
exactly.
it'll do some other stuff for you. And that's how it is. I mean, we develop those tools and do the things that help build us. And I think that's
Yeah,
great. And
yeah,
I'm grateful that you found that. I loved your story and hearing about it. And when we talked a few weeks ago to schedule this, I was like, this is different, but I want it shared because I think a lot of people are in the same situation or have been, right? That we're almost our own worst enemy. And I think a lot of mental health really at its core is us being our own worst enemy because we don't think that we're worthy enough to get treatment. We don't think that we're messed up enough because certainly somebody's had it harder than we have and any number of excuses that we make up to not get better when in reality we're all worthy.
yeah,
You're just as worthy as me. I'm just as worthy as you and the guy and the gal down the street. We're all just as
yeah,
worthy. We just have to accept that we are and acknowledge that we have that self-worth and that like no, I'm worth this.
yeah,
And so I'm thankful that you found that and that you've had this journey and we're willing to come on here and share this journey with others. I really do appreciate it. And um, if people wanted to reach out to you, if they wanted to know more about you, what's a great way for them to find you?
the best way to find me would probably be on my Instagram, at Kyla Courte. Pretty simple. I share some of my heart there and things that come to me to write, and would be happy if anyone had any questions or was starting this journey on their own, because I did a lot on my own and then was able to sort of just by osmosis have other people come into my life to, take my hand and hold me along the path. So
Yeah.
it's a team effort.
Yep. The right people come into your life when they need to, and
Yep,
the wrong ones leave when it's time.
exactly. You just let it go. You hold life with that open hand, and what comes when you need it comes, and what leaves when you need it leaves.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I'll leave you with the final thought. If somebody was struggling right now, what would you say to them? Somebody that's in that dark space that needs help but is unsure where to turn.
I would say you hold every key to every cage, and you just have to choose you, and it's so worth it. And it's can be slow or it can be fast, and it's just deciding. Tomorrow can be a totally different day.
Yep, that's awesome. It's so true. The
Yeah,
we really do hold those keys. And
yeah.
thank you again, Kyla, for coming on. I really appreciate you. Guys, be sure to go on to Instagram, give her a follow, share this episode with anybody who would find value from it. who would find it inspiring or to grow to help anybody. And please, just in general, share this podcast. Let's get the word out and help as many people as we can to heal and overcome all sorts of mental health issues in our lives and in the lives of others. And I thank you guys for tuning in. This, by the way, was our first, we've gone international now, even though it's just across the border to the north, but we've we have an interview in another country now, so we'll take that as a win, along with Kyla's great inspiration and everything that she shared with us today. So thank you again, Kyla, and everybody, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week on another episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. Love you guys. God bless.
Thank you.